Please take a seat. The show is about to begin. Right back after a brief intermission. Please take a seat. The show is about to begin.
Thank you so much for being here for the very first Axios House at the Republican National Convention. This is the first time we've done this since our launch in 2017 as a media business. I'm Steph Kite. I'm a politics reporter at Axios. And if you are following along with our live stream, following along on social media, please use our hashtag Axios House. We have a great lineup today and this week. Reminder that tomorrow we have our events with Donald Trump Jr., Congressman Jim Jordan, and our event on the power of Latino voters. If you want to join any of those upcoming events, you can find one of our amazing staffers who are here running these events, and they can give you more information there. But I am pleased to welcome our very first guest for our very first event, for our first RNC Axios House, Senator Steve Daines, who is the NRSC chair. Senator, thanks for coming here and being with us today. I feel like we have to start with the latest news. J.D. Vance will be the running mate for former President Trump. Would love your reaction to that pick and how this impacts Senate races across the country and in Ohio.
Yeah, it's a great pick. Of course, J.D. is a colleague. I know J.D. very well. I was campaigning for J.D. back in 22 in his Ohio Senate race. Remember, there in the Cincinnati area, closing out the last 3 days. My father's a Marine. J.D. Vance will be the first U.S. Marine ever to serve as vice president. I think J.D., we all know how smart he is, but I'll tell you, his personal story, in terms of how he grew up, that so many Americans know about, he relates to many Americans today that feel like they're left out of what's going on in the economy and generally in life. I think he will do something for the ticket that's important, has an appeal to lunch bucket Democrats. That reminds me, when I was growing up in Montana, my great uncle was a union steward at a smelter, and one of those lunch bucket Democrats that back in those days would have been an FDR guy, would have been a Mike Mansfield guy in Montana. But today, if he were alive today, you lived in Great Falls, Montana, somebody like J.D. Vance would appeal to him. He would be one of those lunch bucket Democrats that feels like they've been left behind by the Democrat Party, as that party has gone so far left. And I think J.D. will help for Trump to win, to get the electoral map sealed. He needs to win the same states that he won in 2020, plus Georgia and Pennsylvania. He's up significantly in Georgia right now. I think J.D. Vance would be a big help in winning Pennsylvania.
Yeah, are there Senate races in particular that you think J.D. Vance, as the VP pick, will help you win in November?
Yeah, well, clearly we look across the battleground states, and the presidential battleground and Senate battleground states overlap in many cases. We see the map right now as 10 states, probably expanding maybe to 11, maybe 12. But at the moment, you probably take West Virginia off the map, because Jim Justice is going to win that race after Joe Manchin retired. And Trump is going to win West Virginia by 40 points. We're not spending resources there. The Democrats aren't spending resources there. So that takes us to 50-50. And now we would need to pick up one more seat out of the next 8 or 9, and that would give us the outright majority if we didn't have J.D. Vance as vice president. But with J.D. as vice president, we have the majority now. We would want to build a more robust majority, add a few more seats. But I think J.D. is going to help us in states like Montana, like Ohio. When you think about Tim Sheehy's race in Montana, Bernie Moreno's race in Ohio, I think it's a big help, frankly, in Ohio. As President Trump picks a son of Ohio, that's going to help Bernie there in that race.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, and I guess it should be worth pointing out, and thinking of the electoral map, I mentioned Pennsylvania, and that's going to be a help, I think, for Dave McCormick as well. I think it helps him in Wisconsin. Again, you think about these Midwest and these more history of, again, those lunch bucket Democrats. That's a lot of our Senate battleground states, and it's a lot of our presidential battleground states too.
Well, I do want to note that it was just 2 days ago that there was an attempted assassination of former President Trump. I wanted to ask, have you spoken with the former president since then?
So I texted him right when the news had broken. I didn't feel like it was appropriate to probably call him at that moment. I did call Dave McCormick, who was at that Butler rally. He was in the front row. Dave is a West Point graduate, native from Pennsylvania. Also served in the 82nd Airborne, had been deployed to Iraq. And I got Dave on the phone, and it was a very chaotic situation. He just assured me he was fine. He said, I think President Trump's okay, because he saw him walk off, but still you just don't know in that moment until he's checked out by medical professionals. But literally, as I was chatting with him, he's getting other inbound calls from family members, just checking in. I didn't want to take up his phone line, but it was just assuring to know that Dave was okay. We were just, of course, he was aware that there had been some people critically wounded, did not know at that time that fire chief had lost his life. And there were 2 other, innocent members of that political rally that were hurt. It's also been reported, and Dave didn't tell us, I'm just reading what I'm reading in the news, is that it sounds like his kind of battlefield instincts of taking care of people, of mobilizing and making sure those around him are okay. He was assuring those who were certainly in a very frightening moment that it's going to be okay, and very protective, and just proud of the leadership he demonstrated at that really difficult moment.
Yeah, so we've heard from President Biden, who has said that he thinks, we need to bring the temperature down. Trump has said we need to unify the country. You're in the middle of an election year. How do you balance responding to a very heated political moment while also doing what you need to do to win a majority in November?
Well, I agree. This is a moment to take the temperature down. The rhetoric and hateful rhetoric and over-the-top rhetoric is not a one-party problem. This extends across both parties. But I think it's very important at this moment, and hopefully litigating the rest of the election the next 3.5 months, that we try to take the temperature down. I think the American people are yearning for more of a policy debate versus a personality kind of contest. And the more we can talk about the contrast in policies, the more I think the better off we'll be here in litigating this election. And I think the American people are looking for something here that's a little less divided in terms of kind of the normal partisan attacks.
How are you encouraging Republican Senate candidates to do that, to lower the temperature while they're trying to win seats?
Yeah, well, it's something that we've just encouraged our candidates to, as you think, first of all, with what's going on with the presidency, and as we're litigating these Senate races, it's a fact that most of these incumbent senators have voted with Joe Biden 95% of the time. That's just an empirical fact. And if you look at what the Democrats are messaging back home, especially in some of these states that tend to be a little more center-right or red, they're running as far away as they can from President Biden. In fact, we kind of jokingly said, I'm willing to buy a tank of gas there in Air Force One to bring Biden into Ohio, into Montana. We're happy to pay for that. They want to stay thousands of miles away from Joe Biden or Kamala Harris because they know that's a liability, not an asset. And contrast that to President Trump and J.D. Vance. Our Senate candidates want that ticket in places like Montana and Ohio, and you're probably going to see them there.
So speaking of some of these policy areas that you want to focus on this election cycle, inflation has been a top voter concern repeatedly in the polls. What would Republicans do if you win back majority in the Senate to actually provide relief for families who feel like they're struggling paying for their lives right now?
Yeah. I think there's a couple things. And some of you, I'm sure, remember the debates we were having, thoughtful and sometimes heated debates, shortly after President Biden was elected, and they had control with Kamala Harris in the Senate as the tiebreaker, 50-50, and they had the majority in the House. Remember, there was $1 trillion of unspent COVID money sitting on the sidelines in December of 2020. Now, election happens, they come to Washington, and they jam through on a purely partisan basis a $1.9 trillion COVID stimulus package. So you take $1 trillion sitting on the sidelines, add $1.9 trillion additional, so nearly $3 trillion shoving into the economy. That's inflationary. In fact, Lawrence Summers, who was Clinton's Secretary of Treasury, he sided with us. He was warning the Democrats of saying this will ignite inflation. And so the first thing we need to do is not repeat those mistakes of launching, I'll call them cash cannons of borrowed money into the economy, which have an inflationary effect. I think second would be when you start looking at our energy portfolio in the country. I'm a chemical engineer by degree. I love talking energy, and I'm passionate about it for a lot of reasons because I think it's very important for economic security and frankly for national security, as we've seen what's happened with the Ukraine invasion, what that means to energy for Europe. But every year we need about 2% more energy than we needed the year before. That means in 25 years we're going to need about 50% more energy than we need today. So we need to be expanding our energy portfolio, not restricting it. And the Biden policies of just killing the Keystone Pipeline out of the gate, which comes into Montana as the first state as it comes down from Canada, putting a pause on LNG exports, EPA launching rules that will shut down baseload power. You sum that up, it's starting to reduce the amount of energy potential we have. And over the long haul, that will be inflationary because energy demand is going to keep going up. And then you think about the AI revolution going on. I just had heard Eric Schmidt speak recently. I mean, the demands on the grid and baseload power are going to continue to significantly increase as we start to embrace AI further.
Yeah. Speaking of inflationary policies, former President Trump has said he would impose 10% tariffs across the board, 60% tariffs on Chinese imports. Experts have warned that this would raise prices for Americans. What do you think about that proposal?
Yeah, well, we've got to think through the very real problem, what's going on in terms of global competitiveness as it relates to, like, China as an example. Many of you know I spent 6 years living in China. When I graduated from college, my first 13 years was with Procter & Gamble. 6 of those years were actually living in China, launching American brands and businesses to compete against the Chinese. This is back in the 90s. We had 2 kids born in Hong Kong at the Matilda Hospital on top of Victoria Peak. So I'm very aware of the challenge we face right now as it relates to the trade imbalance with China. I embrace free trade principles, but also know there are times when you have to take a look at protecting your own interests here, particularly when you have another country that's promoting unfair practices to level that playing field.
But would you support 10% tariffs across the board?
Across the board, I'd want to engage in that conversation a little further. I think that's part of our, as a Senate, to look at policies like that. Unilateral across the board, something that you want to be thoughtful about. And I think be more inclined to do targeted type tariffs like that versus something that's just universal. But that'd be, we got to study that. President Trump hasn't been elected yet. We don't have a Republican join the Senate yet, but I think we're on our way.
Okay. Last question. In my conversations with people on the Hill, your name frequently comes up as someone they're watching is a potential Senate leader contender. I know that you're focused on winning the majority right now, but are you considering throwing your hat in the ring?
You just answered the question. I'm focused on winning the Senate majority. And I'll stay with that answer all the way until I tell you, until we have got a lot of work in front of us between now and the election. You look at, and of course, May through July polls are not usually indicative, and especially in presidential years, looking at the data. But we've got a lot of work to do between now and November 5th. I'll have a conversation with you there. How about November 6th or 7th? Actually, make sure we know make sure we have a majority leader election in the U.S. Senate.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Senator, for your time. Up next, looking forward to a conversation, a view from the top with Eugene Scott.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to take a moment right now to have a great conversation with Mark Shriver, who's here from Save the Children, which is one of our sponsors that have made all of this possible. Not only are they sponsoring this event, they're going to sponsor an event for us at the DNC. And so we really, really appreciate you taking time to talk to us about the great work that you're doing there.
Thank you.
If you all aren't aware of everything we have planned for the RNC the rest of the week, we want to encourage you to go to axios.com/ there about what all we have happening, which is all subject to change. There might be some new programming happening, so just make sure you stay there, even if you've checked it as recently as this morning. Also want to encourage you to sign up for our newsletters, the AM newsletter and the sneak peek. There's lots of information in there about what all is happening. But right now, we really, really want to get to the bottom line of what it is that you all are doing and have been doing over the past year. And so I want to start with this, Mark. We know this is Save the Children Action Network's 10th anniversary. Can you tell us a little bit about why Save the Children created SCAN and what the last 10 years have achieved?
So Save the Children Action Network is the advocacy arm of Save the Children. Save the Children was started 100 years ago, has its roots in rural Kentucky, was feeding kids during the Depression, and it was the precursor of the federal lunch program. And what happened was, over the course of really decades, children are often, treated as, you're doing God's work, you're doing great work. Elected officials will say you're doing wonderful work, and they'll nod their heads, and then they don't fund the issues that families, working families, care a lot about, and that impact children disproportionately. So I guess, honestly, Eugene, we just kind of got fed up with it. There are advocacy groups out there for guns, for abortion, for the environment. Who's doing that for kids? And that's what Save the Children Action Network was started 10 years ago. And we want to be the voice working across with other partners on behalf of kids to actually, when the senator just talks about all the things that are bipartisan and things that can pull the country together, there is no better issue than early childhood education and making sure that kids in America are fed. The polling numbers are outrageously high for supporters of President Biden, for former President Trump, and for independents. But too often we just, that's that issue of early childhood education, childcare, and feeding families just gets pushed to the back burner. And we want to raise that visibility, and we're hoping you guys will cover it more. And we're hoping the people that are watching this, that are in politics, that work for members of Congress, that are advocacy groups, realize that kids need a voice. And that's what Save the Children Action Network is. It is a voice for kids that are not giving political dollars, and they're not old enough to vote. So that's why we're in business.
So you mentioned polling numbers. I know you all recently completed a national poll to explore the cost of living challenges families are facing, particularly as it impacts children. Yes. Was there anything particularly special or unique that stood out for you this time?
I've been kind of talking on this issue. I was in the legislature in Maryland 100 years ago, and we've been talking about these issues, and they are bipartisan. The thing that's most stunning about the poll that we just did, which was done by Republicans and a Democratic polling company that talked to over 1,000 people across the country, is that these issues matter to people, to working families. They matter to Republicans, to Democrats, and independents, yet the political leadership does not make this a priority. That's the thing that's most surprising to me. I mean, and it's across the spectrum. It's not just urban settings, it's rural America, very strong support in rural America, in urban settings and in suburban areas, but we have not figured out how to get that message out and to find enough political leadership on the federal level that'll push these issues. You know, Save the Children Action Network, Eugene, has done a really good job in states. When you look at the rollout of early childhood education in places like New Mexico, or under Governor Lujan Grisham, or in Vermont under Governor Scott, or in Colorado under Governor Polis, Governor Inslee up in Washington State. They're all different governors, different parties, and they have realized that this issue, early childhood education and feeding families, resonates with voters, and it's good policy. It brings people together. I was just talking to a friend the other day who's polling this in rural Alaska, and it's a really popular issue in rural Alaska, the issue of childcare and investment in that and feeding kids.
A lot of the programming for helping kids who are in need in this country focuses on like urban youth. You all have done a lot of work with the rural youth, maybe exclusively. Can you talk to us a bit about some of the challenges like kids in rural America face that may be unique?
Yeah, when you look, Eugene, at how kids are doing in rural America, there's more, the obesity issues are higher. The threat of dying before their 18th birthday is higher. The educational attainment is lower. All of the indicators are worse in rural America. And so many nonprofits in this country focus in urban areas, and it makes sense because it's, it's a better ROI. You can reach more kids. It costs less money to do that. But Save the Children was started in rural Kentucky, is still working in rural Kentucky and across the country as well. We want to focus on that and try to raise the investments for kids across the country, including obviously urban and suburban areas. But too often in America, rural America has been forgotten. So that impacts both Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And there are a lot of people in rural America. Just look at Walton. Walmart. I mean, they're making a lot of money selling to people in rural America. And Save the Children and Save the Children Action Network have support for that work in rural America.
What are some very clear policy solutions to the problems that kids in rural America are facing?
Should ask the senator that. I mean, yeah, you can get them back in here. I mean, there are tax credits that have been discussed, under former President Trump and under President Biden. There's also the issue about investing in programs that have a track record of success, early childhood Head Start, but also home visiting programs as well for kids 0 to 3. My father started Head Start, so I'm a big believer in it. Not every Head Start program has great results, and the government shouldn't be funding those, but an overwhelming majority of them do good work, and they do prepare our children. First 5 years of life, Eugene, right? 90% of brain growth happens. First 5 years of life, 90% of brain growth happens. Yet as a country, we almost don't invest until a kid enters kindergarten when they're 5 years of age. You ask any businessman or businesswoman what that means. It's a huge lost opportunity. And as a country, we're falling behind our competitors, whether it's India or China or any other country that's investing in early childhood education. Save the Children Action Network is at the forefront of pushing those issues forward, and we hope people that are watching this and in Washington and state capitals will invest in our children.
Awesome. So bottom line, what's the main takeaway you want this crowd to leave here with about the work you all are doing?
I think the main takeaway is that this is a bipartisan issue. Republican voters are supporting early childhood education and taking care of our children and making sure they're fed in this country. It's an economic issue. It makes the country more competitive. Businesses will go into areas that have good early childhood education where kids are fed. I hope the people that are watching this, the staff, the elected officials will realize this is a winner. It'll bring people together. They need to get off the sidelines and lead. Kids don't have a lot of money and they don't vote. So it's easy to ignore them. And it's especially easy to ignore, them if they're in rural America or, because they're poor. But they can succeed if they get an opportunity. We're not asking for handouts here. We're asking for investments. Investments in programs that work, investments in policies that work, and that can help families raise themselves out of poverty. I mean, ultimately, that's the American dream, right? Give them a good education. And kids, when 90% of the brain growth happens and we're not investing in those first 5 years of life, those kids go into kindergarten, they're so far behind my kids that they're almost never going to make it up. It's really hard. But if we invest, if Axios continues to shine a light on this, if public policy leaders on both the Republicans or Democrats or independents have the chutzpah to stand up for somebody who's not going to vote for them for years and are not going to make political investments, then the country's going to be in a better place. That's why everybody should join Save the Children Action Network.
Well, we thank you for joining us right now, Mark, and for you all sponsoring this event and sharing with our guests the important work you all are doing.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Appreciate
and we want you all to stay with us. We have at least 2 more events that we hope you leave here with some insight on. And as I said, if you're not following Axios.com/events, we really want to challenge you to do that. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, I am glad to be back again and excited to introduce our next guest. She is a freshman senator who has been making waves on Capitol Hill and in the news. Please join me in welcoming Alabama Senator Katie Britt.
Thank you.
I did want to ask you about the latest news, just to kick this off, that J.D. Vance is the vice presidential pick for Donald Trump. I know you all joined the Senate together. What kind of a vice president do you expect?
Oh, he's going to be tremendous. First off, we are classmates. Our freshman class is really close. We get together once a month, have dinner. Not only do we talk about policy issues, but we've also had the opportunity to get to know each other and gotten to know J.D. and Usha. And Wesley and I are grateful to be able to call him friends. I think he is going to be tremendous when it comes to the policy issues, tremendous when it comes to telling his story, and tremendous when it comes to connecting with hardworking Americans, with parents, with families. I think we could not be in a stronger position than we are right now.
Yeah. We were talking earlier, you will be speaking at the convention later tonight in a prime spot. I just wanted to get your reaction. You also were chosen to give the rebuttal to the State of the Union. Yeah. You are a freshman senator. You are clearly a rising star in your party. What do you make of this week? How big of a moment is it for you?
Well, first off, obviously entered this week with a great deal of sadness. I mean, after seeing the events of Saturday, obviously continue to pray for President Trump, for his family, importantly, the gentleman who lost his life, his family, and those that were injured. It's really a moment, though, I feel like, for us to come together as a nation. So not only in prayer, but really finding a pathway forward together. You know, I often say, consistently, that I believe we've got to return to a place in this country where we can show people respect even when we don't agree with them. And I think that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle took the same oath of office that I did, and they're serving the same nation and the same hardworking Americans. And so finding a better pathway forward, I hope, is something that that this lends itself to. But as far as having the opportunity to speak this evening, I am so humbled, and having the opportunity to give the State of the Union response. I believe that the Republican Party is the party of parents. It's the party of hardworking Americans. It's the party of families. And having an opportunity to talk about the things that we're doing, the things that we want to do when we take back control of the Senate, when we win the White House, and when we hold the House, the things we want to do for the American people, that's it's a real honor, and I think the American people are ready for that hopefulness. I mean, they are seeing prices soar. They're seeing a wide open border. They're seeing an actual world in chaos. They want some certainty. They want a plan. They want a vision, and they want some hope. And that's what we're going to give them this week.
Yeah, and I know that you are passionate about families, and this event is about looking at solutions to the high cost of living that impact families and kids. What are you working on? How are you working to find solutions for American
Yeah, so
families?
there's a number of things I feel like are affecting children. And so let's start with the mental health cost first. So when you look at social media, I mean, our children are paying the price. So from 2011 to 2019, the rate of depression amongst our young people more than doubled. That directly coincides with the rise of social media. If you look at the facts from last year, 1 in 3 high school young women said she actually considered death by suicide. And then 9%, 9% of our high school population actually attempted death by suicide. We have to do something. I am really proud that there are several bipartisan solutions in the United States Senate right now. I mean, there is a bill that has 60 co-sponsors. It's Senator Blackburn and Senator Blumenthal's bill. That bill needs to go to the floor. I have a bill with Senator Chris Murphy and Brian Schatz and myself and Ted Cruz that helps put up guardrails and helps put parents back in the driver's seat. Doing nothing is not an option. Our children are paying the price. And so when we look at that, certainly that's something I've been proud to work on. Also, partnering with Senator Amy Klobuchar on youth mental health research to really try to get to the bottom of this and to be able to help our young people create a foundation to thrive. And then when you move into additional spaces, obviously we know that the price of goods is up. I mean, as a parent, I often say, I don't have to ask people what it's like to raise a kid right now. I am living it. And so whether it is gas prices, grocery prices, electricity prices, or amongst others, finding a way to drive those down so that parents have a greater opportunity to provide for their children is critically important to me. I think we do that through not only energy independence, but becoming energy dominant. And the truth is, we do it better and cleaner and more efficiently than anywhere else in the nation. And I also look at things that parents are struggling with, like child care cost, right? I mean, I remember when my husband and I were looking to send our kids to daycare. I mean, it felt like we needed to take out a second mortgage. I'm not kidding. And you think about the number of people who do want to enter the workforce. If you want to have the opportunity to stay home with your child and you do, I think that is incredible. But if entering the workforce or re-emerging into it, if an impediment to that is that you cannot afford childcare, then we as a nation have got to figure that out and do better. So there's 2 different buckets that we've got to look at. Obviously accessibility, and then we have to look at affordability and try to figure out how we find a pathway forward, how we put parents back in control of making those decisions, and we give our kids an opportunity to thrive. And your previous guest on here nailed it. When he said, the first 1,000 days, or I think he said 5 years of a child's life, he said 90% of their brain forms. You think about these kids, guys, that are getting to kindergarten, and by no fault of their own, have never been taught their letters or their colors or that a dog barks or been read to, and we expect them to catch up between 5 and 8. If an 8-year-old, if you're not reading on grade level by 3rd grade, your chance of graduating high school goes down 4 times. If you don't graduate from high school, your chance of being arrested goes up 4 or 5 times. I mean, if you look at that vicious cycle that we are allowing to be not only created but sustained in this nation, you can trace that back to an 8-year-old. So between 5 and 8, we've got to catch these children up. And guys, that's not on an 8-year-old. That is not on the 8-year-old, that's on us. And so trying to figure out better pathways to create foundations for these children to succeed. And I believe education is the pathway to success. It's the pathway to unlocking the American dream. Those are all things that we've got to do better on.
Yeah, when it comes to coming alongside parents and helping, especially on the affordability front, when it comes to childcare, is this an area where you feel like you can work across the aisle and actually get something done?
Absolutely. Look, here's the deal. There are things where obviously we share a different perspective than our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. But where there is something where we share a common goal, then I think I have a duty to the people that I serve and the people of this nation to get in a room with my colleague and try to figure out a path forward. And so on a number of issues, childcare being one of those, obviously in the education space, been doing it on a lot of women's issues as well. Really proud to partner with Senator LaFonza Butler on the NIH Improve Act, we have the highest maternal mortality, Alabama does, than any other state in the nation. It disproportionately affects Black women. And in 2024, this should be moving dramatically in the other direction. And so Lavanza and I have come together to say, let's do the research, let's get to the bottom of this. Coming together with Senator Maggie Hassan to say, look, it's a Rural Obstetrics Act. It's saying these women, 55 out of 67 counties in Alabama are rural. And so when we look at a woman who is pregnant and is obviously in late stages of pregnancy and may need to deliver her child in a rural area, because we have multiple maternal care deserts in Alabama. About a third of our state does not have access to maternal care. And so when you think about if someone needs to deliver that child, Maggie and I have come together to say, let's make sure that our first responders have the resources, that they have the knowledge, that they have the tools they need to help save that woman and that child. So I could give you example of these kinds of things, and I'm going to continue where I share a common goal with someone, even if they have a different letter beside their name. I'm going to get in a room with them and try to figure out a path forward. And I think this is important to talk about right now, and so I'm glad that you have brought that up, because we've got to continue to do a better job of telling that story and let people know that there are things where we are working together and we are forging a path forward. I think if America heard more of that, I think they'd have an opportunity to maybe exhale a little bit more. And I think it would also give them hope, and it would also, I think, incite an excitement of them to maybe get in a room, maybe work with someone that they don't necessarily agree with on every issue, but where they find that common ground, forging a path forward for the good of their community and the good of the people.
Yeah. Well, speaking of women's issues, you're the youngest Republican woman elected to the Senate ever, and you're serving during a time where your party has struggled to get suburban women in particular on board, especially post-Roe. What do you think your party has to do to reach more women like you and vote for the party?
Steph, I think I appreciate the question, and I think we have to just speak directly to it. The other day we had a hearing with the Secretary of HHS, and I had not intended in my line of questioning. I had a number of questions, particularly about maternal mortality and these types of things that I had planned to kind of sort of bring up and talk about. But before me, Senator John Kennedy had gone, and he had talked about kind of late-term abortions and kind of where the administration was on those things. I think that President Trump has shown us a vision. You see it here, you see it in the platform. We are a pro-life party, and I think we have the opportunity to continue to protect life in multiple ways. But talking about truly where the Democrats are on this, my friends shudder when I speak of it. And in that hearing, we went back and forth, and I just said, I didn't plan on talking about this, but let's talk about it real quick. You didn't put the Hyde Amendment in your budget. And he very proudly said, absolutely, we didn't put the Hyde Amendment in our budget. Then he kind of sort of moved into that space. And so I actually talked about what it was like to take the life of a child at 39 and 40 weeks. And people say that doesn't happen. I actually had just gotten off the phone with a physician who had actually performed those types of abortion. And that's just not where America is. America is not there. I mean, if you look at it, Steph, like 1 in 8 nations in the entire world allows you to have an elective abortion up until the moment the child is born. Only 15 nations in the whole world allow you to have an elective abortion after 15 weeks. 46 out of 50 European nations have limitations on elective abortions after 15 weeks. And so I think when you start talking about it, and when I actually talked about what it takes, delivering a baby, breech, then sticking a knife up the neck, opening up, sucking out the brains, collapsing the skull to get the child through, that's not where America is, and I think we have to do a better job of telling that story.
And also looking back over the past couple years since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, voters across the country have gone to the polls and voting for protecting access to abortion, voting to stop bans at the state level. What do you make of that? That seems to show voters being more concerned about their access versus.
Well, and I think again, we've got to do a better job telling our story, but that's exactly what Roe was for, is to return these rights to the state. I am proud to be pro-life and am really proud of what our party stands for. We're the party of life, the party of parents, the party of families. I have found it interesting. I rolled out the Moms Act, and I really did think that the concept of the Moms Act was something that could be bipartisan. And the Moms Act is something that provides resources for all of those women who are pregnant, and when they Google it, try to figure out kind of sort of what do you do? I mean, I remember when I found out I was pregnant, and I really didn't know where to start and really didn't know what to expect. And so helping that woman through that journey, it also has a section in there that helps women, whether it's returning to work or whether it is, trying to figure out she needs diapers or she needs housing or she needs any of those things. So it has a number of things in there, and I think we continue to tell that story, continue to support women who choose to have their child. And I'm excited about spreading that message, and I think it's one that America can get behind.
And as someone who is pro-life, do you agree with the decision to remove, for the first time in 40 years, a national abortion ban from the RNC platform, or did you wish they had kept the traditional language?
Yeah, so I think obviously President Trump has set the agenda. I think, he ran both in 16 and in 20 on returning it to the states. We have done that now. I think we'll continue to work to find ways to protect life, and I think that the platform says that.
Well, thank you. And as my last question, lots of politicians are parodied on SNL, and I did want to ask when you watched Scarlett Johansson.
I got the gold star on that one, y'all. I mean, really.
Well, I do want to hear, what was your reaction? When did you watch it?
Yeah, so I didn't feel like in the moment was really the right time, but my husband actually handled it best. My husband is with me here today. You can't miss him, 6'8", 320, right there in the back. But he was so funny. My daughter had called and she had said, she called him, so I kind of knew. I thought, I know what this is about. And she said, "Hey, Dad, I don't want to go to school." And I could hear by the response to him. And I think a lot of people forget that, obviously we put ourselves out there. I put my name on the ballot. I ran. I have stepped into this arena, but my children didn't choose this. And so my husband, I said, put her on speaker. And so I said, "No, sweetie, you've got to go to school." And he said, "Listen, sweetheart, your mom was played by Scarlett Johansson. Come on." And he said, "Look, they didn't get a cast member." He said, "They didn't bring in a C or a B-list star." He said, "They went straight to the top." And he said, "Think about this. They had to bring in an Avenger to play your mother." And so I have often said, as Scarlett Johansson was the Black Widow, I am really hopeful that becomes my nickname in the U.S. Senate. But yes, so not on my bingo card, but heck, if you've got to be played, I really got the gold star.
Well, thank you so much, Senator Britt. We appreciate your time. And up next, we have my colleague, Sophia Kai, who will be interviewing Congressman Jim Banks.
Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited for this conversation.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
It's been less than 48 hours since the assassination attempt on former President Trump. He says he wants to strike a more unified message. What will a changed Trump look like?
Well, Trump always rises to the moment. He did it in every single one of his State of the Union speeches. I'll never forget how good he was on the floor of the House when he gave those powerful speeches, some of the big speeches that he gave at Mount Rushmore and other places. He just has a way of rising to the moment. So I expect Thursday to be that type of historic speech, not just from someone who was already a historic figure, but now someone who I think will live on as an iconic figure. That photo on Saturday night that was seen all over the world is a photo that's going to be in history books 100 years from now, nearly missing an assassination attempt. It's President Trump's moment and opportunity, I think, Thursday to seal the deal. I think Donald Trump was already going to win in November. I think he seals the deal on Thursday with a powerful speech that brings the country together, that ensures that he's going to win by historic margins.
Have you spoken to him or texted him or otherwise been in touch with him?
I called him this morning. I told him I'm in Milwaukee. He answered the phone, and we had a great short chat. Told him that my family is praying for him and his family. We're so glad that he's okay, and we're excited about Thursday. So we had a nice short chat, but he was as upbeat as ever. I think he understands the historic significance of this week, the Republican convention here in Milwaukee, how important it is to not just bring the party together, but one note from today already. I was on the House floor. I gave the nomination speech awarding the delegates from Indiana. This Republican Party is more united than the Republican Party has ever been in my lifetime. You saw that with former Trump critics who are now 100% on board with them. But I think what you're going to see on Thursday is someone who looks as a candidate running for president, again, a former president running against a current president, already historic. You're going to hear a speech from someone who rises to the moment and looks far more presidential maybe than what he ever looked before.
Do you get the sense that he was concerned at all about his safety moving forward? I mean, it's still another 4 months. Yeah. And, I've got some reporting that on Saturday he was supposed to go to Grand Rapids. It wasn't announced, but did he talk to you at all about what the next 4 months in terms of his travel, his campaigning, what would that look like?
The president told me he won't back down. He won't stop. He won't let any of this deter him from going out and doing what it takes to win in November and save the country. And that's what I've come to expect from him. I spent a good amount of time with him when he was in the White House as a new member of the House of Representatives elected in 2016. So I served 4 years with him in the White House. I got to know him better, though, when he left the White House. I was chairman of the Republican Study Committee, the largest conservative caucus on Capitol Hill, and we spent a lot of time with him when he was thinking about running again and what another campaign would look like in this campaign cycle. And one thing that President Trump is, from the very first time that I ever spent time with him, he always talked to me about not backing down. Don't back down. And what you saw on Saturday, raising his fist in that powerful moment, is someone who does not know how not to back down. And I think that's what you're going to see him he's not going to miss a beat. He's going to stay on the campaign trail and run hard into November because there's so much at stake.
How will Saturday's events change your next steps in Congress? The rest of this term, you're virtually guaranteed to be elected the next senator of Indiana. What will that look like?
There are no guarantees. So I won't take it for granted. I'm running hard in Indiana. I'm the Republican nominee. I ran unopposed in Indiana. And a big thank you to Donald Trump. I mean, Indiana is Trump country. He's more popular in Indiana than he was ever in 2016 or 2020. He's far more popular today even than what he was then. So when he endorsed me, the first endorsement of the 2024 election cycle, way back in January of 2023, it helped clear the field in Indiana. No other Republican in our state wanted to step up and run against me. So he cleared the field. Now we're running hard into November. But as far as what happened on Saturday, I think it further unifies the Republican Party.
But what will your next term, what will the rest of this term, I mean, are you working on anything specific in terms of making sure this doesn't happen again? I mean, is there anything tangible that your party in Congress can do?
Well, yes. I mean, Jamie Comer, the chairman of the Oversight Committee, and Speaker Johnson has already tasked, on a conference call yesterday, tasked House Republicans with jurisdiction on committees to begin an investigation and what went wrong on Saturday. Obviously, there were lapses in security by the Secret Service that at this point it's not a blame game, but something went wrong. So it deserves an investigation to make sure something like that never happens again. I think that's an important priority. We have a moral obligation in the House Republican majority to do what we can to investigate what happened to stop that from happening again. But I think everyone agrees, whether you're on the right or the left, this is a very tense moment in American politics. And it has been since I got elected to Congress in the election of 2016. The heightened tension. I mean, I've had death threats against my family, my 3 young daughters. I mean, very recently, a person arrested for that. And the U.S. Capitol Police, who does heroes work, I mean, they've boosted their security. I'm sure the Secret Services as well. What we saw happen on Saturday, I mean, I think I applaud President Trump for doing what he will do on Thursday to unify the country, and I appreciate that President Biden is doing what he can as well, and speaking to the country last night about bringing down the temperature to try to prevent something like that from happening ever again, too.
I'm glad you mentioned your 3 daughters. This event is called Save the Children. I mean, taking politics aside for just 1 minute, I mean, what are we missing? What sorts of systems need to be in place to make sure that young people, in this case, a 20-year-old, doesn't unleash just absolute horrifying tragedy?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we have to look at what happened, and I know those investigations are ongoing to see what could have been done to prevent that shooter from getting on the roof and attempting to assassinate President Trump. So it deserves more attention, but I think there are big mental health issues in this country. We have a drug crisis in this country, and that deserves a lot of attention by President Trump in the next presidential term and by Congress over the next few years as well. What can we do about it?
Let me shift gears a bit. You're very close with JD. If he and former President Trump were to win, what kind of vice president would he be? How would he complement Trump?
Yeah, I think he adds so much to the ticket. I mean, President Trump is the leader of the Republican Party and the America First movement. J.D. Vance is the next generation of it. So it cements that Trump legacy for a long time to come. I know J.D. very well. Both of our families come from the same mountain town in Kentucky. My dad was one of 10 boys and girls, part of a hillbilly family that moved. I say that affectionately. My grandma and grandpa Banks moved to Indiana from Jackson, Kentucky, which is the same town.
You don't call him Papa also, do you?
We have lots of names, and some of them are not appropriate, but a true hillbilly family, a working class family. And this is what I love about J.D. Vance is the pick. When it comes to the swing Midwestern states that Trump Vance have to win in November, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, the working class blue collar voters who used to vote Democrat but are Trump Republicans today, nobody can go out and help Donald Trump talk to those voters better than J.D. Vance, who comes from a similar working class background as a lot of those voters do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm hearing that J.D. Vance will be parked in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin.
Appropriately.
So the flip side of this, J.D. Vance is 39. He's turning 40 soon. He's a one-term senator, like not even. What's going to be his biggest challenge?
I don't know that he'll be challenged at all.
Come on.
I mean, he brings a unique, fresh perspective, and I think that's what America is hungry for. He's the next generation. And he's so articulate. I mean, if you've read Hillbilly Elegy, I mean, I read it when it came out in 2016. Yep. It's a powerful book. It's not a political book, but it explains the moment that we're in about the forgotten working men and women of this country. And I think what's powerful about that is that he's going to bring that perspective very well to the White House. What I found in American politics today, and I don't mean to demean any of my current or future colleagues, is that Congress is filled with millionaires and people who are very wealthy, who come from both sides of the aisle, who oftentimes self-fund their campaigns to get themselves elected to Congress or the Senate, who aren't really fully in touch with the people who they represent and don't understand that inflation really hurts working class people, the people who live paycheck to paycheck like a lot of people in my family do, who feel the pinch of Bidenomics and the economic picture that we find ourselves in today. I think J.D. Vance, because of where he came from, can talk to those people in a powerful way, and I think he'll be a very good vice president.
Maybe just one piece of advice you have for him.
Well, I watched the last running mate and vice president to Donald Trump very closely. He happens to come from my home state, and I think Donald Trump was the president. He's going to be the president again. He's the driver of the agenda. I find Donald Trump, by the way, every time I've ever spoken with him, he's very open to feedback. And I hope, but I already know that J.D. Vance will be very, very eager to provide him that feedback and give him perspective and tell him things maybe sometimes that he doesn't want necessarily to hear, but it'll be powerful feedback to help him make important decisions for our country. I know he's going to do that, so he doesn't need my advice.
Alrighty. The tax package. I mean, it's among, a number of ways that the next Senate, next Congress will have to address, as well as the child's tax credit. I mean, in those two issues, what is it that you'd want to change?
I was there in 2017 when we passed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And by the way, as another side note, since we're here at the Republican convention, the biggest difference between 2016 and 2024 is that the leadership of the Republican Party in the House and the Senate today are aligned with the next president. And in 2016, they weren't always aligned. And when it comes to an issue like the tax cuts, I think the biggest mistake that we made in 2017 is that we overemphasized corporate tax rates and didn't make the individual tax cuts permanent for working families. And we cannot make that mistake again.
And that's what you're proposing.
That's my hope as the next senator from Indiana representing hardworking Hoosier families. It'll be my mission and my priority to emphasize making the individual tax cuts permanent as part of a larger package. I mean, that's the leverage. There are lots of other things that and those tax cuts that we need to make permanent, but the top mission, the first priority, is making the individual rates permanent. And I think a lot of Republicans today who weren't necessarily in line with that school of thought in 2017 are very much unified in understanding that that's the priority today.
And
That's the working class, the new working class oriented Republican Party of today that is different than 2017.
And my understanding is that's going to be a big theme in your speech this week.
That's right. I have the honor to speak tomorrow night along with a number of other Senate candidates, Republican candidates.
Give us a little preview.
Yeah, I come from a working class background. My dad is a retired union factory worker. My mom is a nursing home cook, and we didn't come from a lot. We didn't have a lot of money. We didn't have a powerful name or a whole lot of power in the small working class town that I came from. But that's what makes this country great. I mean, this is the greatest country in the history of the world, and we got to protect it.
Okay, I want to end with two fun things. Give us one fun thing about yourself that we may not know, and one fun thing about former President Trump that we do not know.
Well, the second question is harder. I'm a girl dad. I have three daughters, 14, 13, and 11. So please pray for me. My daughters went and saw Caitlin Clark play last weekend. She had the best game that she's ever had at the Indiana Fever. We're basketball fans, but I find, I grew up with brothers. I didn't have sisters, so this every day is a learning experience. I find out every day that I'm not in charge and I don't know anything. I do have a boy dog named Marshall.
Do you know about girl math?
The girl band?
Girl math.
Girl math. I don't know girl math. But I've learned a lot about Taylor Swift. So,
okay, good. And one fun thing about former President Trump that we don't know.
The incredible thing about President Trump is, and I'm going to write about this one day, but when he was president, he welcomed all of us members of Congress. I was a nobody freshman member of Congress. He welcomed us into the White House, into the Oval Office. He took me up to, one day he said, "Do you want to see the Lincoln bedroom?" I'm like, yeah, I want to go see the Lincoln bedroom. Took me up to the Lincoln bedroom and gave me a tour of the private residence and got to ride in the limo with them, got to spend time at Camp David. President Trump is a regular person. It's a side of him that most people will never see. And I can't wait for him to be back in the White House and have repeat some of those experiences again. I did see him one time dip his steak in ketchup. So I like that. His appeal to regular, normal people, like my dad. My dad is a lifelong Union Democrat who loved Ross Perot. Donald Trump was the second candidate that he loved. He didn't love other Republicans. He was more excited about Trump winning in 2016 than me winning a seat in Congress. And Donald Trump he appeals to voters like my dad in such a big way. He's turned those working class Union voters into Trump Republican voters, which is why I think he's going to win big in November.
Congressman Jim Banks, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for making this possible, and you're welcome to stick around grab a bite, have a drink, and tomorrow we'll have more great programming, including an interview with Donald Trump Jr. Thank you.